Well, Democrats responsible for keeping public schools closed during the COVID-19 pandemic are still facing no repercussions, despite new studies proving just how harmful the virtual learning was for our children. According to new data released by the National Center for Education Statistics, 70% of U.S. public schools are now reporting an increase in students seeking mental health services since the start of the pandemic. Here to react is senior fellow at the Independent Women's Network and senior contributor to The Federalist, Asra Nomani. Good morning to you, Asra.
Oh, good morning, Ainsley.
Good morning. So what do we do about this problem now?
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to talk to you here from my hometown. I'm in Morgantown, West Virginia. Behind me is my high school. And I just wanted to talk to you from here today because, you know, this is where it all began for me. This is where I got to walk the halls. Back behind me, there's a curb where I ran over learning how to drive. I was editor of our newspaper here, the Red and Blue Journal. That's what school is supposed to be about, right? It's not supposed to be about this remote learning and home computers and all of this activism. What we have to do is exactly, I woke up this morning and I had my cup of coffee with this cup that says, "Don't wake the bear." Because as you know, Ainsley, we've been in the trenches together in Fairfax County and throughout this whole crisis. Mamas Bears and Papa Bears have awakened, and what we have to do is we have to seize political office. Education is politics, and all of these decisions to shut down schools and keep kids from walking the halls of schools like my alma mater here, they were done by politicians. And unfortunately, yes, mostly Democratic politicians in cahoots with the teachers' unions. So we've got to fight them on policy.
The main drivers behind many of these school closings and all the masking, the teachers' unions, they donate exclusively, almost exclusively to Democrats. And Democratic leaders who prolonged this in-person classroom, remember when they said this, Asra, listen.
We know that kids need in-person learning and that remote instruction is no substitute for it, but it has to be safe.
Bottom line, learning is non-negotiable, but neither is safety.
And we really better be very careful, particularly when it comes to children, because the more and more we learn, we're seeing things about what this virus can do.
I want to talk about safety. 70% of U.S. public schools reporting an increase in students seeking mental health services, not to mention all the children that are behind in the classroom as a result of Zooming or virtual classrooms for so long. And you know firsthand, didn't you stand graveside at a teenager's funeral who had committed suicide?
Yes. Yeah, Ainsley, I was just thinking about that. It was the summer of 2020, and this poor classmate of my son's in high school had just gotten into the isolation well that had happened to so many kids in the school system. And unfortunately, there we stood then, burying him. And what was a lesson learned in our school system at that point early on in this crisis? Very little. They continued to keep schools closed. And, you know, here I am in West Virginia, and I remember January 2021, while schools were still closed in Virginia, the schools in West Virginia had opened because the government here had decided to take a brave stand against those that were trying to keep the schools closed. And that's what, you know, the cost is to these kids. There's a concept now called learning poverty. These kids are now in a crisis for their entire generation, and we, the adults, have to continue to move forward, make good policy so that they can have education, not activism in their schools.
Asra, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.